Rome didn't fall in a single moment. It changed slowly, and then, all at once. One man broke the Republic. Another made sure it never came back. This is Augustus, also known as Octavian. Not the strongest, not the most experienced, but somehow the last man standing. When Julius Caesar is assassinated in 44 BC, Rome expected the Republic to return. Instead, it got years of chaos, more war, and eventually an emperor. And that emperor wasn't an obvious choice. He wasn't a famous general. He wasn't even particularly respected at the start. He was 18 years old when he suddenly found himself at the center of Roman politics, surrounded by powerful enemies, experienced rivals, and a system already falling apart. So naturally, he decided he was going to take control of it, which sounds ambitious because it is. What follows is a story of strategy, patience, and very careful power grabs that turn a fragile teenager into the most powerful man in the Roman world. This is how Augustus went from Caesar's heir to the first Roman emperor. So, before he was ruling Rome, before he was carefully reshaping the entire political system, Augustus was just a teenager who was about to inherit a very dangerous situation. Augustus was born in 63 BC, originally named Gaius Octavius. His family was respectable, but not especially powerful, not poor, not insignificant, just somewhere in the middle, which, in Roman politics, usually means you're not expected to take over the world. What he did have was a connection. His great-uncle was Julius Caesar, which is quite useful, especially when that relative is one of the most powerful men in Rome. Caesar takes an interest in him early on, giving him opportunities and gradually bringing him into public life. As a teenager, during the 50s and early 40s BC, Octavian shows signs of being careful, observant, not flashy, not loud, which is the exact opposite of someone like Caesar. But in a system full of bold personalities, that might actually be an advantage. In 45 BC, at around 17-18 years old, Octavian is sent to Apollonia in modern-day Albania to study and to train for a future career. It's a relatively calm moment, just before everything changes. Then, in 44 BC, news arrives. Julius Caesar has been assassinated. Rome is in chaos. And Octavian, now 18 years old, is suddenly faced with a decision. Because Caesar's will has been read, and in it, Octavian is named as his adopted son and main heir, which means he doesn't just inherit money, he inherits Caesar's name, Caesar's legacy, and Caesar's enemies, all at once. Now, at this point, most 18-year-olds would probably think, maybe I'll stay out of this, because Rome is unstable, dangerous, and full of people who just murdered one of the most powerful men alive. Octavian's response: he goes to Rome. When he arrives, the situation is complicated. The conspirators are still active. The Senate is trying to regain control, and a powerful figure named Mark Antony, one of Caesar's closest allies, is already positioning himself to take charge. And Octavian? He's young, inexperienced, and not taken particularly seriously. From the outside, he looks like Caesar's heir, but not much more, which is exactly what makes him dangerous. Because while everyone else is focused on each other, they underestimate him. And this is where Octavian is different. He's not trying to dominate immediately. He's not charging into battles. He's not making bold, dramatic moves. He's watching, waiting, learning how the system works and where it's weak. Because in 44 BC, Rome doesn't belong to one person anymore. It's open, contested, and filled with rivals, all trying to take control. And now, one of those rivals is an 18-year-old with Caesar's name. The biggest problem standing in his way is Mark Antony, a seasoned general, a skilled speaker, and one of Caesar's closest allies. Antony expects to take control after Caesar's death. From his perspective, Octavian is just a teenager with a name. Octavian's first move is simple but very important. He accepts Caesar's adoption and takes his name, becoming Gaius Julius Caesar, which is slightly confusing because there was already one of those. But it's also very effective because now he's not just an heir, he is Caesar, at least officially. Then he does something very clever. Caesar's will had promised money to the people of Rome, but that money hasn't been distributed yet. So Octavian steps in. He pays it himself, which is expensive, risky, and extremely effective, because now the people associate him with Caesar's generosity, not Antony. Over 44 to 43 BC, still only 19 years old, Octavian starts building support. Veterans loyal to Caesar, political allies, and anyone who sees potential in him. He's not the strongest figure in Rome, but he's becoming harder to ignore. Tensions with Antony rise quickly. By 43 BC, the two are effectively rivals. The Senate, interestingly, decides to support Octavian, not because they trust him, but because they think they can control him, which is a recurring mistake. Octavian is given command and fights alongside Senate forces against Antony. This leads to battles in 43 BC, including the fighting around Messina. Antony is pushed back, but the situation doesn't stabilize, because now Octavian has an army, and that changes everything. After the fighting, the Senate tries to sideline Octavian, which is not a great idea, because he now has troops, loyal troops. So instead of stepping back, he marches on Rome. At 19 years old, which is a bold career move. In 43 BC, Octavian forces his way into power and becomes consul. At just 19 years old, which is not how that position is supposed to work. But at this point, the rules are becoming flexible. Instead of continuing the conflict, Octavian does something unexpected. He makes peace with Antony and joins forces with him and Lepidus. In 43 BC, they form the Second Triumvirate. This one is official, legally recognized, with extraordinary powers, which basically means they now control Rome together. And just like before, power comes with consequences. Between 43 and 42 BC, they carry out proscriptions, lists of enemies who are executed, and have their property taken. Political opponents, rivals, and even former allies. It's brutal, but effective. By 42 BC, the men who killed Julius Caesar are still out there, mainly led by Brutus and Cassius. They've gathered forces in the eastern provinces, preparing for war. So in 42 BC, the triumvirate marches to meet them. The armies clash at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC. It's actually two battles, fought over a short period. The fighting is intense, chaotic, but ultimately, the triumvirate wins. Brutus and Cassius both die, and with them, the last major resistance to Caesar's legacy. After the victory, Rome is effectively theirs. The Republic still technically exists, but power is firmly in the hands of three men. The territory is divided. Mark Antony takes the east. Augustus takes the west. Lepidus gets Africa, which seems stable for now. Back in Italy, things are not going smoothly. Between 41 and 40 BC, Octavian faces unrest, land disputes, and dissatisfaction from soldiers expecting rewards. It's not glamorous, but it's important, because ruling is harder than winning. Meanwhile, the triumvirate starts to weaken. Lepidus, the third member, gradually loses influence. By the late 30s BC, he's effectively sidelined, leaving just two real powers, Octavian and Antony. Over in the eastern provinces, Mark Antony is doing things differently. He forms a close alliance with Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, powerful, intelligent, and very influential. Together, they build a strong position in the east. Back in Rome, Octavian sees an opportunity. He begins to frame Antony, not as a Roman leader, but as someone being influenced by a foreign queen. This becomes a propaganda campaign. Antony isn't just a rival anymore. He's a threat to Rome itself, which is very effective messaging. By 32 BC, now around 31 years old, Augustus is ready. Relations between him and Antony completely break down. War is declared, not officially against Antony, but against Cleopatra, which is a clever way of making it seem like a foreign conflict. The final confrontation comes at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, a naval battle fought off the coast of Greece. Octavian's forces, led by his general Agrippa, face Antony and Cleopatra. The battle is long, tense, but eventually, Antony's forces break, and he retreats. In 30 BC, Octavian follows them to Egypt, with no real options left. Both Antony and Cleopatra die, and just like that, the last major rivals are gone. By 30 BC, at just 33 years old, Augustus stands alone. No triumvirate, no major opposition, just one man controlling the Roman world, which is impressive, but also slightly familiar. Because Rome has been here before, one powerful man controlling everything, and last time it didn't end well. So Octavian faces a problem, not how to gain power, but how to keep it, without ending up like Julius Caesar. In 27 BC, Octavian does something unexpected. He gives power back to the Senate, officially restoring the Republic, which sounds very generous, and also not entirely true. Because in response, the Senate gives him a new title, Augustus, meaning something like the revered one. Not king, not dictator, but something carefully designed to avoid those words. And from this point on, Octavian becomes Augustus. What's clever is how the system now works. Augustus doesn't call himself king. He doesn't abolish the Republic. He doesn't openly take absolute power. Instead, he holds multiple positions at once: control of the army, influence over the Senate. So technically, the Republic still exists. But in practice, he controls everything. And this is the key difference. Julius Caesar took power very directly. Augustus makes it look like he hasn't. He presents himself as first citizen, not ruler. A servant of the state, not its master, even though everyone knows what's really going on. And the result is stability. After decades of civil war, Rome finally settles. Power struggles stop. The system works. Not as a republic anymore, but as something new. Because Augustus understands something crucial. People don't just want power. They want order, predictability, stability. And after years of chaos, he gives them exactly that. By the late 20s BC, still in his late 30s, Augustus has achieved something no one else managed before him. Not just winning power, but securing it long term. Because now, the wars are over, the system is in place. And the question is, no longer, can he take power? It's, what does he do with it? What follows is something Rome hasn't seen in a long time: stability. This period becomes known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace, beginning around 27 BC and lasting for decades. Which doesn't mean no conflict, but compared to constant civil war, it's a massive improvement. One of Augustus's most important moves is controlling the army. He creates a more permanent, professional military. loyal not to individual generals, but to the state, and more importantly, to him, which helps prevent the kind of power struggles that destroyed the Republic. He also establishes something new, the Praetorian Guard, an elite group of soldiers tasked with protecting him, which is a smart idea, especially if you're trying not to end up like Julius Caesar. Augustus also invests heavily in Rome itself, infrastructure, roads, buildings. He famously claims he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble, which is a strong before and after. He reorganizes how the empire is run, improves tax systems, strengthens administration, and creates a more efficient government, which isn't the most exciting thing to watch, but it's incredibly important. Because this is what makes the system actually function. Augustus also carefully controls his image. He doesn't present himself as a king. Instead, a restorer of tradition, a bringer of peace. His image appears in statues, coins, monuments. Always calm, controlled, and slightly idealized. He even introduces moral and social reforms, encouraging marriage, promoting family life, trying to reinforce traditional Roman values. Which is an interesting move for someone who just quietly replaced the Republic. And the key difference now is time. Augustus doesn't rule for a few years. He rules for decades, from 27 BC to AD 14, which means an entire generation grows up knowing only this system. By the time he reaches his later years, now in his 60s and 70s, Augustus isn't just a ruler, he's the system itself. Rome doesn't function without him. And that creates one final problem. Because eventually, he's going to die. And when he does, everything he built will be tested. Unlike a monarchy, there's no clear official rule for who comes next. Because officially, this isn't a monarchy. It's still, technically, a republic, which makes succession complicated. Augustus tries to solve this. He promotes potential heirs, but several die before him, leaving him searching for a stable solution. Eventually, he settles on Tiberius, his stepson. In AD 4, Augustus formally adopts Tiberius, making him his heir. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a practical one, and importantly, it creates continuity. In his final years, Augustus focuses on stability, ensuring the system can function beyond his lifetime. Because if it collapses after he dies, then everything he built was temporary. In AD 14, at around 75 years old, Augustus dies, after more than 40 years in power, which is an unusually long run for someone in his position. And now, the real test begins, because for the first time, the system has to operate without him. No guiding figure, no central authority holding everything together. Just the structure he created. Power passes to Tiberius, and crucially, it works. There's no immediate collapse, no return to civil war. The system continues, which means Augustus achieves something even more impressive than gaining power. He made it transferable. Because that's the real difference. Others had taken control before. Others had ruled Rome. But Augustus built something that lasted. A system that didn't depend entirely on one man. And that's what turns him from just another powerful figure into something much bigger. Because his impact doesn't end with his death. After AD 14, Rome doesn't collapse. It doesn't fall into chaos. It continues. The system created by Augustus keeps working. And that is the real test. Because if you compare him to Julius Caesar, the difference is clear. Caesar was bold, direct, and changed Rome quickly. Augustus was careful, patient, and changed it permanently. He didn't just take power, he redesigned the system, turning a collapsing republic into a functioning empire. without ever officially saying that's what he was doing. And that's what makes it work. He avoided the mistakes that got Caesar killed. He didn't appear as a king. He didn't openly take everything. He made power feel acceptable, even necessary. The system he created lasts for centuries. The Roman Empire continues long after him, and the idea of one central ruler becomes the standard across much of the world. Because Augustus wasn't the strongest or the most dramatic, that he was the most effective. He understood that power isn't just about taking control, it's about keeping it. From an 18-year-old stepping into chaos in 44 BC to the ruler of Rome for over 40 years, his rise is not loud, not obvious, but incredibly effective. And that is who Augustus was. The man who didn't just inherit Caesar's legacy, he finished it. And in doing so, created something that would define Rome for centuries.